Welcome back, Jacksonville. Welcome back to another episode of This Is Jax. This is your go-to podcast for all things happening in our vibrant city. I love this city. I'm Nate Riggs, and today we're diving into a topic that's buzzing in the real estate world. So you've probably heard some chatter, I'm waiting to buy until the interest rates drop, or I'll sell when the market picks up. Well, today we're breaking down why now might be the perfect time to make your move in the Jacksonville real estate market. Welcome to This Is Jax, a hyper-local podcast. We're going to do our best. We're going to bring on successful business owners, the people who drive the cities, share a lot about what makes our city so great. So you can be confident and comfortable. This is a city that you want to call home. So the first thing we got to do is really dive in and understand the current market dynamics. We've got to look at the macro, which could be what's going on either globally or at least in the U.S. When it comes to home ownership, we often look at in the U.S. And then we've got to look at the micro, which is like, first, we've kind of got the northeast Florida, and then we break it down to Jacksonville. So a lot of times when we break down Jacksonville data, we're looking at 6 northeast counties, or we're just looking at Duval specifically. On this show, I really try to differentiate because the price points are dramatically different. Like the overall price point in northeast Florida is $400, but if we go to, say, just Jacksonville, we see that the average price or the median price in Jacksonville is $390. But if we go to St. Johns County, which is just directly south of Duval, it's like $540,000. So that's a big difference whether you're living in Duval or whether you're living in St. Johns. But oftentimes when we talk to Jacksonville, to somebody who's not from here, we're kind of referencing these 6 counties. It's the same thing, if we talked about Los Angeles or San Diego. I don't know all of the outlying cities, neighborhoods, or counties that are around there. I only know San Diego, the city. So if you were from San Diego and you were explaining that to me, and you were just saying, you know what, I'm from San Diego. Like when I grew up, I told everybody I was from Tampa Bay, but I actually lived in Largo, Florida. But if I told you I lived in Largo or was from Largo, you'd say, well, where is that? And I'd say, well, it's in Tampa. You'd be, oh, okay, Tampa. So it's the same thing when we talk about real estate. Oftentimes we talk about Jacksonville real estate, and we're kind of grouping in those main 6 counties. And that's as small as we need to go until you actually start your home shopping process, where then we're looking at your actual budget, your actual wants and needs and desires. And then we're saying, you know what would really be good? Clay County for you. You know what? I think St. John's might be best for you. Or we might be looking at exact communities. You know what? Maybe you're looking at E-Town, or maybe you're looking at Nocatee. And we break it down extremely micro there. But that's what we need to do is understand it. So the waiting game, what do we got? We got a lot of buyers and sellers who are in a holding pattern. They're anticipating lower rates. Here's the kicker. Last year, there were 1.5 million fewer homes sales than usual. This is a significant dip. We have talked about it at length on the show. We've talked about the election. We've talked about what happened. So if you've listened to those episodes, you know that even though last year was one of the lowest years in history, you would know why. And you would also know to expect it to rebound. So these potential buyers, they didn't vanish. They're waiting. They're just like you. They're waiting for the right moment. When rates drop, this pent-up demand could flood the market, driving up home prices. So there is what we're talking about here. The waiting game is there's a mindset, both sellers and buyers, who are saying, hey, listen, I really want to buy a new house. The need's not big enough to force me to do it, but I want to buy a new house. However, interest rates are kind of higher than I want, and so I'm going to wait. That mindset often requires you to think that you're the only one thinking that way. The other 1.5 million people who didn't buy last year are all thinking the same thing. So you can bet that when the market comes back, when the interest rates come down, those 1.5 people are going to join you and enter the market ready to buy a house. And those people are people that waited. You already have a whole nother group that were planning on doing it regardless this time of year. Maybe they took a new job or they're moving. for family, whatever it is. So you're adding to that. So you're going to see more than average this year, most likely, as a result of bouncing back from last year. So what happens is now you're going to look at a house and you're working with your expert agent and you've done all your appointments and your real estate strategy meetings and you know what your top 5 must-haves in a house are. And so you want to go to this community and you want to see the 4 best homes. Well, guess what? Everybody else is saying the same thing to their agent. I want to see the 4 best homes. And now you see where I'm going with this. You get a situation where you could get bidding on a house, and so the price goes up. So just because interest rates come down, now the price went up. Now you may be paying the same payment anyways. Get what I'm saying? It only takes one person to outbid you on a home. So think about that. It doesn't have to be 20 people. Just one person could outbid you. So that is something to keep in mind. Now there is some data out there, and I will reference some articles throughout this. I'll have the links in the show notes, in the description below, of course. So be sure to check that out. And what we want to really get into is like, what's going on with interest rates? Why are we predicting that interest rates will come down? So the first article I'm going to look at is Fannie Mae. What determines mortgage rate on a 30-year mortgage? And right now we're looking at the data. We can see where it was up. These are average nationally, up over 7%, and then it went down to 6.2% in when was that? September of 2024, and then it kind of bounced back up like 6.8%, but it's been trending down. They reduced the federal fund rate by 0.5% in September, and that caused it to come down. Instead, the average on a rate, I'm sorry, let me read this right here. When the Federal Reserve reduced the Fed rate by 0.5% in September, many market observers expected they would decline. Instead, the average on a 30 rose from 6.09 on the 19th, and the day after, it rose to 6.84. So why is that? Because oftentimes people think when the Fed cuts rates, they don't just cut the rate, they cut the fund rate. But the key takeaway here is that the 30-year mortgage rate is benchmarked to the rate of the 10-year Treasury note. So more than the Fed note, you have to look at the Treasury note. So as the Treasury note moves, mortgage rates follow suit. So what we really need to look at is, the connection between the 10-year Treasury note and the 30-year mortgage, which is exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to break down the role of the 10-year Treasury note. So what is it? Well, think of the 10-year note as a loan that you give the U.S. government. In return, they pay you interest for 10 years. Okay, so these are bonds that people are buying, and you may get, a ton of different buyers. And we're going to go through that here. But here's why it matters. This note is a key indicator for mortgage rates. When its yield, or the interest rate, goes up, mortgage rates often follow. Conversely, when it drops, mortgage rates tend to decline. So the first thing we need to look at is the spread, right? Because there is certainly a spread. So as your 10-year goes up, then your mortgage rates follow it. As it comes down, they follow it. The typical spread between a 10-year Treasury yield and a 30-year mortgage rate historically has been 1.5% to 2%. So this means that if the yield is 4%, then mortgage rates are going to be 5.5% to 6%. That's just how it is. So why does this spread exist? Well, the first reason is risk premium. Mortgage lenders take on more risk compared to government bonds, okay? And those are considered ultra-safe investments. Loan servicing costs. Mortgages require administrative work, leading to additional costs. There is a little bit of a culture in this country where people think things should be free, but nobody's working for free. And remember, when you're buying a house and the average price in Northeast Florida is $400,000, if you're putting 20% down, you're borrowing, what's 20%? Of 4. It's quick math here. That's 4 times 2 is 8. That's $80,000. So you're borrowing $300, right? And $20,000 from the bank. If you're using a VA loan, which a lot of people do in this market because we have several military bases and installations, so we get a lot of active duty and retired service members who have access to one of the greatest home purchasing assets of all, the VA loan, that's a zero down loan. That's $400,000 you're borrowing from the bank. Now, most of these people don't have $400,000 in the bank. That's a lot of money to them. It's a lot of money to anybody. So the bank assumes a lot of risk that, are you going to pay this loan back? And so and then there's work to get it done. There's background searches, there's paperwork to file, and there's jobs that people have, part of the economy, local economy, and the, full American economy, banking system. And so those people have to get paid for the work that they put in. And so there's a cost associated with the loan. And that's part of why you have an interest rate, right? Investors demand, if mortgage-backed securities are in high demand, then mortgage rates can tighten relative to treasuries. And then economic conditions. In times of high uncertainty, the spread can widen as lenders become more cautious. So the government's printing trillions of dollars and just funneling it away, disappearing, or it's not going back into the American economy like it should be, then, it's not looking good, right? So current market trends have actually responded to this. So since mid-2022, the spread's been wider than normal, often exceeding 3% due to economic uncertainty and inflation, right? So if the spread narrows back to historical norms, when the yield designs, mortgage rates could dip faster than expected. So what it's saying there is the yield right now, the spread is bigger. So as of February 6, 2025, the 10-year Treasury yield is approximately 4.458%. So what it's saying is, if it goes back to 1.5 or 2, right now it's spread wide. As the Treasury yield comes down, if mortgage rates are also coming down parallel, then that means the spread is staying the same. But if the spread gets smaller, down to that 1.5 or 2%, then that means that mortgage rates are dropping. Remember what we just talked about. There are a bunch of buyers sitting on the sideline waiting to enter the market. And if you think that they won't just jump when those rates drop, then you're mistaken. They will drop. They will jump in there, and supply and demand 101 tells us prices of homes will go up as a result. Current trends. Recently, it's been downward, right? So the 10-year Treasury has been trending downward, hitting that mortgage rates may soon decline as well. So there's more data there that says they are trending down. I've got a couple articles here. There's an article here on Investopedia.com, 10-year Treasury bond, what it is and why it matters. It's talking about it a little bit there. The Fannie Mae one we just referenced, and then an article that just came out recently, Morning Bid, bonds diffuse, stocks bounce, BOE cut expected. And that's on Reuters.com. So we can get into these articles. This is where we're seeing okay, these are coming down, but what are some reasons why they would come down? So I've got, 5 main reasons why. Inflation expectations. So if investors think inflation will rise, then the demand for a higher yield to make up for the lost purchasing power. So remember, the investors are the ones buying the bonds. So they're only going to buy the bond if the yield or the percentage return that's guaranteed by the government is higher than inflation. So if inflation is at 4%, then they want a 5% yield. Does that make sense? If inflation is down to 1%, 2%, like the Fed claims they're trying to get it to, then an investor will be happy with a 3 or 4% yield, right? And then if we have a 1.5% spread on a 4% yield, now we're looking at a mortgage rate of 5.5%, 6%, which is pretty good. High inflation, 10-year Treasury goes up. Low inflation, it goes down. If gas, food, rent prices are skyrocketing, investors want higher interest rates on their bonds. Keep up with it. The second is Federal Reserve actions. The Fed controls short-term interest rates, so like the Fed fund rate, but it influences long-term rates like the Treasury. If Fed raises rates to fight inflation, then the 10-year may go up. If the Fed cuts rates to stimulate the economy, 10-year may go down. So if the economy is slowing down, Fed might lower those interest rates, lower that Fed fund rate to make borrowing cheaper, which pushes the 10-year yield down. All these things, right? We're watching them. Supply and demand for bonds. When people buy 10-year treasuries, prices go up and yields go down. When people sell treasuries, prices go down, yields go up. I'm going to pause here. We've got a couple more, but keep this in mind when you're out there doing anything. There's a lot of noise, either on X or on Facebook, and you see people just posting different things. And it's only once you start studying this data day after day that you realize most people don't really have a working knowledge. And that's okay, because we all have a different part to play. Our society is massive. There's 321 million people in the U.S., so it would be impossible for everybody to have all the knowledge and keep the economy going. But it's also important to have someone in your corner, someone that can break it down, like This Is Jax, like an expert real estate broker who's willing to tell you this stuff. For it, there's a lot of agents out there worried about the next TikTok dance, when what they should be worried about is understanding what supply and demand for bonds, stock market, and investor confidence is, and how it's going to affect the future of you after you buy this home. That's the whole point of the show. That's what I'm trying to say. So the stock market, investor confidence. If the stock market is booming, investors move money out of bonds and into stocks, and the yields go up. If it's crashing, investors rush to buy safe bonds, and the yields go down. This is why sometimes when you saw something like back in COVID, when there was so much uncertainty, but what happened? The Fed lowered the rate to keep the economy going. People rushed into these bonds because they were government backed, and they figured that was the safest thing. And so as a result, what happened? Mortgage rates, they fell through the floor. What did we see? A frenzy, a feeding fest of homes. People were getting $20,000, $40,000 cash over their ask price. Now, listen, I represented some of these sellers, and while I give them advice, while I give them a guide, at the end of the day, who they choose to work with, that's their choice. Okay, I'm there as an advocate, as an advisor, and I had clients. I had some clients that would say, you know what? I'm happy where I'm at. I know I'm going to make a lot of money off of this sale regardless. Show me the families that have offered for this property, and show me the investors. And inevitably, it'd be like, well, sir, you have 14 offers. These 10 are investors, and these 4 are families. And he would say, you know what? Push those 10 to the side. I want to help these families. And some people have a heart. And I'm not saying you have to do this. I don't know what your circumstances are, but if you're in this position, this is great. And I love that. Okay, now let's look at these 4 offers from these families. Let's, pick the best one. And whatever the seller's criteria for that, that's their business. I had other folks who were like, I don't care, show me the money. They wanted the most amount of money. And so whichever offer, most of the time, that was an investment offer. Now, I'm not a huge fan of that, because oftentimes that was like one of these big investment groups, 401k groups that were just buying up all the property. I didn't like to see single moms miss out on a home because they got outbid by some mega corporation with somebody's 401k money, right? That's just enjoying life. I didn't really like that. But again, all I can do is advise, guide, counsel people, be their advocate. They're hiring me to be their agent, to be their representative and represent their needs and interests. That's really what it is. Global events, foreign investors. Listen, if global investors like China or Japan are buying a lot of Treasury, yields go down. If they sell them, yields go up. If Europe is in a recession, right? This is an example. If Europe goes into a recession, well, foreign investors might move their money from Europe over to U.S. bonds, which lowers the yields. Makes a better environment for buying, right? So that's a little bit about what the role of the 10-year Treasury note does. It really plays a big part. So yes, we watch for the Fed fund rate, but as you saw there in some of that data I was going over, when they lowered it in the fall of 24, rates actually went up the next day. Well, that was because there was a lot of other things happening in the economy that affected the 10-year yield, which thus affected mortgage rates. That's just kind of how it works. Listen, we're gearing up for a big year in real estate. We're already writing offers, putting properties under contract, signing new listing agreements. So I'm already seeing this personally with just my clients, people calling me, hey, what do you think? I think I'm ready. I'm seeing the news. I'm seeing what's going on. I know who the president is. I know what's going on in the economy. I know what to expect out of the future. So let's do it. So we're signing agreements left and right, getting business going there. Listen, May 21st, it's right around the corner. I've got a VIP event. Anybody who sends us 2 referrals. So if you're listening to this and you know someone in the Jacksonville area who's maybe needs to sell, to move, or they're looking to come here, I'd love to be connected with them. Just go to rigsgroupfl.com and there's a contact us page. Send me a little note. Would love to hear from you. I've got a VIP event. If you're local, I'm taking you out to that event for sending me a referral. So, and it's going to be a killer night. Our parties are awesome. All right, so here's why you should act now, all right? I've got a little bit. If you're a buyer, okay, here's why you should act now. You're thinking about buying and you're on a 3 to 6 month timeline, I think you should bump that to a 0 to 3. First off, high inventory. There's more homes available right now, giving you a broader selection. Remember, there's a lot of homes sitting. They've been on the market for a few days, right? There's less competition, fewer active buyers. This means you have a better negotiating power. Negotiation leverage. Sellers are more open to discussion, possibly leading to better deals. So what do you got? You got a bunch of inventory. It's been sitting on the market for a long time. You have sellers that are maybe getting a little frustrated. They expected it to sell by now. What's going on? They're screaming at their agent, bring me an offer. What video did you post? Where's the marketing? I want to see proof of this. And this is your opportunity as a buyer to move in and say, hey, Mr. Seller, I got your offer right here. All you got to do is sign it, right? So you've got a little bit of negotiation leverage there. I know the rate may be a little higher. So here's your pro tip, buyer. Work with your agent to negotiate a rate buy down in your offer. Listen, there's ways to get your interest rate lower. I know we're saying, hey, there's projected to go down, but we don't ever want to tell you, hey, buy it now and then refinance later. Now, I've done that. I just did it last year in fall of 23. I closed at 7.1%. Okay, I had to do it. I had to move. What am I going to do? I closed at 7.1%, and 6 months later, as soon as the rates dropped down, refinanced to 5.75. Our payment dropped hundreds of dollars. Okay, so it can be done. So if you know you're moving, if you know this is your 5 to 10 year house, your 3 to 5 year house even, it's a good idea to say, like, you know what, let me get in now while the getting's good, before the rush, before the mad dash, so I'm not getting outbid on those properties that I like. And I think you got an opportunity to get a really great property right now, and you've got negotiating power. For sellers, all right, this is for you. I work with people on both sides, so I understand it. Market preparation. You got to get your home ready now. Position yourself ahead of the curve and attract serious buyers. We just talked about buyers working, asking for those rate buy downs. What if you put it out there as an incentive? What if when you marketed your home, you actually marketed your home and you actually said, hey, you know what? I'm sitting on $200,000 of equity. That's crazy, because never in history would I be sitting on that much equity in only a few years. I'm really happy with that amount. And while I want to walk away with as much of that as possible, but what if I incentivize this? What if I offer a rate buy down up front? I know interest rates are making it hard for buyers, but what if I put out there, work with our preferred lender partner, and we'll buy your rate down to 4.5%. We'll buy your rate down to 5%, whatever amount it is that you're willing to put towards it. Work it out with your team. If you have an expert agent whose partner has a partner on his team who's a mortgage broker and can handle that type of thing, then you're going to have these kind of conversations, and chances are it's going to make your property more attractive. I know there was a lot of talk about, sellers don't buy buyers agents anymore, but let me tell you something. That buyers are already feeling pinched, okay? And the norm has been, hey, I know it's the norm, and as much as I hate saying that, this is how it's always been done. But we're still only a few months away from these changes, okay? And things take time. So I've worked with both sellers and with buyers, and I've worked with buyers who are like, yeah, we understand, we're willing to pay. And I've worked with buyers who are like, it's a stretch for us to even buy. There's no way we can afford to hire you. We're relying on negotiating the seller to pay you for us. That's another incentive. Put that out there, willing to pay a buyer's agent commission. You can lure people. You lure people into your house that way. You make it easier for them to buy. There's a lot of people that can qualify on the monthly payment, but they don't necessarily have hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank. They just don't. Okay, so you've got to kind of do that. Your pro tip: consider offering a rate buy down or offering a buyer's brokerage commission as an incentive. So here's the final thoughts. Here's the conclusion on today. And we really went into it a lot. The real estate landscape is definitely shifting, both on a macro and then on a micro here in our city. We can see it moving in our city. So by staying informed, acting strategically, you can beat the herd, okay? And you can make the most of the current market conditions. So if you have questions or you need some guidance on this, don't hesitate to reach out. Let's navigate this market together, and we'll make the best decision for your future, you just go to rigsgroupfl.com. There's an About Me page. There's also like a Contact Us. If you're a seller, you go to rigsgroupfl.com/sell-my-home. If you're a buyer, you can click on the tab. There's a bunch of like little buyer consultations, buyer guides. So we'd love to connect with you. We'd love to be a part of it. So thanks for tuning in to This Is Jax. Stay tuned for more insights and updates on everything Jacksonville. And until next time, take care and make those savvy moves.